Admiral Kralthex of the Vorchin Empire stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the primitive blue world spin lazily before him. His 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he surveyed the fleet arrayed behind him. 300 vessels of war, each one capable of reducing a continent to ash. Behind them, supply ships and troop carriers stretched into the darkness, ready to begin the occupation once the initial bombardment was complete. The humans called their world Earth. Soon they would call it nothing at all. Kralthex had conquered 17 worlds in his long career. This one would be the easiest. The humans had barely ventured beyond their own moon. Their weapons were chemical-based projectiles and primitive nuclear devices. They had no shields, no energy weapons, no understanding of slip space travel. By all accounts, they should have still been clubbing each other with rocks. Intelligence reported that the humans were fractured into nearly 200 competing nation-states, constantly bickering over resources and ideology. They would be too busy fighting each other to mount an effective defense. The conquest would take 3 days, maybe 4. Then the Empire would strip their world of its abundant resources and move on to the next target. "Begin the assault," Kralthex commanded, settling into his command throne. "Target their major population centers. I want their surrender within the cycle." The weapons officer, a young Vorchin named Skelrix, hesitated. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple transmissions from the planet. They're requesting dialogue." Kralthex's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Ignore them. Fire." 20 plasma torpedoes launched from the Eternal Dominion, streaking toward Earth's atmosphere. They would detonate over the largest human cities, demonstrating the Empire's power and encouraging immediate capitulation. It was standard procedure, refined over countless conquests. The torpedoes never reached the planet. Brilliant flashes of light erupted in the upper atmosphere as something intercepted them. Kralthex leaned forward, confusion rippling through his consciousness. That wasn't possible. The humans had no orbital defense platforms. Intelligence had been very clear about that. "Tactical analysis," he barked. Skelrix's claws flew over his console. "Energy signatures consistent with directed energy weapons, Admiral. Multiple platforms. They're everywhere. Orbital stations, ground-based emplacements, even their moon appears to be fortified." "That's impossible," Kralthex said. "Our scouts would have detected such installations." "Admiral," the sensor officer interrupted, "we're detecting new contacts, ships emerging from concealment. They were using some kind of stealth technology. Our scanners couldn't penetrate it." The tactical display lit up with red markers. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. The human ships were smaller than the Vorchin vessels, but they moved with unnatural grace, accelerating at rates that should have turned any organic crew into paste. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Monroe sat in the pilot seat of the strike fighter designated Raptor 7, feeling the familiar weight of his helmet and the subtle vibration of the ship's quantum drive. Around him, the cockpit glowed with holographic displays showing hundreds of enemy contacts. The alien fleet hung in space like a swarm of metal insects, arrogant and exposed. They had walked right into the trap. "All wings, this is command," came the voice of General Patricia Cole over the comm. "You are green-lit for engagement. Show these bastards what happens when they come to our home uninvited." Jack allowed himself a cold smile. For 3 months, Earth's combined military forces had watched the alien fleet approach. For 3 months, they had prepared, unified under a single command structure for the first time in human history. Democrats and Republicans, Americans and Russians, Chinese and Europeans, every nation that had once been at each other's throats now stood together. The aliens had made one critical mistake. They had assumed humanity was still divided. They had no idea that the moment the first alien probe was detected at the edge of the solar system, every petty conflict on Earth had evaporated like morning dew. You don't threaten someone's home and expect them to keep fighting each other. "Raptor 7, engaging," Jack reported, pushing his throttle forward. The fighter responded instantly, 0 to 0.8 light speed in under 3 seconds. The G-forces should have killed him. Would have killed him, if not for the inertial dampeners that Earth's brightest minds had perfected in record time. Humanity had spent a century preparing for war with itself. Nuclear weapons, biological agents, cyber warfare, psychological operations. Every advancement in technology had been weaponized. Every tactical doctrine refined through countless simulations and proxy conflicts. The entire species had become experts in one thing above all others: killing. And now they had a new target. Jack's targeting system locked onto an alien cruiser. His finger squeezed the trigger, and twin beams of coherent light lanced out, each one carrying more energy than a nuclear warhead. The alien ship's shields flared, held for a fraction of a second, then collapsed. The beams punched through the hull, and the cruiser vanished in a ball of superheated plasma. One down, 299 to go. Across the battlefield, the same scene played out thousands of times. Human fighters swarmed the alien fleet like piranhas, their weapons tearing through shields and armor with contemptuous ease. The larger human warships, hidden in the shadow of the moon and in stealth orbits around Earth, began their own assault. Kralthex watched his fleet die. It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. The human weapons cut through his ships like they were made of paper. Their fighters moved with impossible speed and precision, coordinated by some network of communication that his sensors couldn't even detect. They knew where his ships would be before they got there, adjusting their firing solutions with preternatural accuracy. "Activate the quantum disruptors," he roared. "Jam their communications." Skelrix worked frantically at his console. "No effect, Admiral. Their network is using a quantum entanglement protocol. It can't be jammed." Quantum entanglement. The Vorchin Empire had been trying to weaponize that technology for 2 centuries. These primitives had already mastered it. How? A human destroyer emerged from behind Earth's moon, nearly 3 times the size of the Eternal Dominion. Its hull was covered in weapons that Kralthex couldn't even identify. The ship opened fire, and reality itself seemed to tear apart. Spatial distortion weapons, gravitational lances, something that looked like weaponized dark matter. 5 of his battleships simply ceased to exist, torn apart at the molecular level. "Retreat," Kralthex commanded. "All ships, emergency slip space jump, scatter formation." The surviving ships of his fleet began charging their faster-than-light drives. It would take 30 seconds to build enough energy for a jump. 30 seconds that they didn't have. The human ships closed in, and Kralthex saw something that made his blood run cold. They were herding his fleet, driving them away from their jump coordinates, forcing them into a tight cluster. This wasn't random aggression. This was tactical brilliance. And then the human ships stopped firing, just stopped. The entire human fleet went silent, holding position in a perfect sphere around the clustered Vorchin vessels. Kralthex felt a moment of hope. Perhaps they were going to allow surrender. Perhaps they understood the rules of civilized warfare. Then the moon spoke. Not literally, of course, but a transmission came from the lunar surface, broadcast on every frequency simultaneously. A human voice, calm and clinical. "This is Dr. Helen Grant, Director of Planetary Defense. To the alien fleet, you have 60 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender. This is your only warning. Any ship that attempts to jump to faster than light will be destroyed. Comply or be eliminated." Kralthex's mandibles ground together. Surrender to primitives. Vorchin Empire had never surrendered. Not once in 3,000 years of expansion. He would rather die. "Charge weapons," he ordered. "All ships, focus fire on the human destroyer. We break through or we die trying." His fleet opened fire in a desperate barrage. Plasma torpedoes, particle beams, kinetic projectiles, everything they had left. The human ship's shields absorbed it all without even flickering. It was like throwing pebbles at a mountain. The human response was immediate and overwhelming. Every human ship fired simultaneously, but not at the Vorchin fleet. At a single point in space, directly in the center of the alien formation. The concentrated energy tore a hole in reality itself, and for a brief moment, Kralthex saw something impossible. A glimpse of another dimension, roiling with colors that had no names and geometries that hurt to perceive. Then the singularity stabilized, and gravity went mad. The Eternal Dominion began to tear apart, pulled toward the artificial black hole that the humans had created. Kralthex grabbed onto his command throne as the deck tilted at an impossible angle. Around him, his crew screamed as they were pulled from their stations. The ship groaned and shrieked, metal tearing like paper. Through the chaos, he saw his fleet die. Every ship, every vessel that had followed him to this cursed world, crushed and broken and devoured by the singularity. 300 ships. 50,000 Vorchin warriors, gone in seconds. The last thing Admiral Krauthex saw before the singularity took him was the Earth, still spinning peacefully, untouched and serene. Beautiful and terrible. Dr. Helen Grant stood in the command center beneath the lunar surface, watching the tactical display as the artificial singularity collapsed safely, exactly as predicted. The alien fleet was gone. Not a single ship remained. Around her, the command staff worked in efficient silence, already beginning post-battle analysis. "Total engagement time," she asked. Commander Kyle Bishop checked his chronometer. 7 minutes, 43 seconds from first shot to singularity collapse. Helen nodded, making notes on her tablet. 7 minutes to annihilate a fleet that had probably taken decades to assemble. She felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Just the cold certainty that this would not be the last time Earth faced such a threat. "Casualties?" she asked. "None, ma'am. No human casualties. Minor shield damage to 3 destroyers already being repaired." Helen allowed herself a small nod of satisfaction at that. Humans had died, of course. Thousands of them over the 3 months of preparation. Construction accidents, training mishaps, the inevitable cost of mobilizing an entire species for war. But in the actual battle, not one. "Begin deep space monitoring," she ordered. "If one fleet found us, others will follow. I want every sensor array at maximum sensitivity. And get me a link to the outer system defense grid. If there are more aliens out there, I want to know about them before they know about us." "Yes, ma'am." Helen walked to the observation window, looking down at Earth. From here, the planet looked peaceful. No signs of the millions of soldiers standing ready, the hundreds of warships hidden in stealth orbits, the weapon platforms disguised as satellites. No indication that humanity had just revealed itself to the galaxy as something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. She thought about the alien admiral, whoever he had been. He had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest. He had probably done it before, to other worlds, other species that couldn't fight back. The Vorchin Empire, they called themselves, according to the transmissions that had been intercepted and decoded. Well, the Empire had just learned a very expensive lesson. Humans were not easy prey. They were apex predators, forged in the crucible of countless wars, hardened by millennia of conflict and competition. Every human child grew up learning about warfare, whether they realized it or not. Every video game, every movie, every story glorified the warrior, the soldier, the hero who stood against impossible odds and won. Earth had been preparing for this war since the first human picked up a rock and used it as a weapon. They just hadn't known who the enemy would be. Now they knew. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Monroe brought his fighter back to the carrier, sliding into the landing bay with practiced ease. Around him, other pilots were doing the same, their ships barely scratched despite the intensity of the engagement. The human losses had been effectively zero, while the enemy had been completely annihilated. It wasn't even fair, really. But then, the aliens hadn't been planning on being fair either. Jack climbed out of his cockpit and removed his helmet, breathing in the recycled air of the carrier. Around him, his squadron mates were celebrating, high-fiving and laughing with the manic energy of people who had just survived combat. But Jack couldn't quite share their enthusiasm. He kept thinking about the alien ships, about the thousands of lives that had just ended. They had been warriors, following orders, believing they were serving their empire, just like him. The only difference was that they had been fighting for conquest, and he had been fighting for survival. Captain Lisa Garrett approached, still in her flight suit, her face flushed with adrenaline. "Hell of a fight, Monroe. Did you see that singularity collapse? That was beautiful," Jack nodded. "Yeah, beautiful and terrifying," Lisa's expression sobered. "You think there'll be more of them?" "Definitely," Jack said. "This was just the first wave. When that fleet doesn't report back, the Empire will send more, bigger fleets, better prepared. Then we'll be ready for them too," Lisa said with confidence. "We just proved that humanity can stand against anything the galaxy throws at us." Jack wanted to share her optimism, but he had read the intelligence reports. The Vorchin Empire controlled hundreds of worlds. They had been expanding for thousands of years. Earth had just made an enemy of a galactic power, and there would be consequences. But Lisa was right about one thing. Humanity would be ready. They had shown the galaxy what humans could do when they worked together, when they stopped fighting each other and focused on a common threat. The question was whether that unity would last once the immediate danger passed. Jack hoped it would, because if humanity could maintain this level of cooperation, this perfect marriage of technology and tactics, there was no force in the universe that could stop them. On the bridge of the human destroyer Defiance, Admiral Richard Brooks watched the last traces of the alien fleet fade from his sensors. 50 years of service had taught him to read battles, to understand the ebb and flow of combat. And this battle had revealed something important. The aliens had been overconfident. They had assumed their technology would give them an overwhelming advantage. They had failed to do proper reconnaissance, failed to understand their enemy, failed to adapt when their initial assumptions proved wrong. All classic mistakes, the kind of mistakes that humans had made thousands of times throughout history and learned from through bitter experience. The Vorchin Empire would learn from this too. The next fleet they sent would be more cautious, better prepared. They would study the battle records, assuming any survived. They would analyze human tactics and technology. They would come back stronger, but humanity would be stronger too. That was the thing about humans. They adapted, they learned. They never made the same mistake twice if they could help it. And now that Earth knew it wasn't alone in the universe, knew that there were hostile forces out there, the entire species would focus on one goal: survival. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth. The Secretary General wants to address the fleet." "Put it through," Brooks ordered. The screen flickered, and Secretary General Carlos Mendez appeared. He looked exhausted but determined. Behind him, Brooks could see the flags of every nation on Earth, united under the banner of the Planetary Defense Council. "To all personnel of the United Earth Defense Force," Mendez began. "Today, we faced our first test as a unified species. An alien empire came to our home, expecting to find us weak and divided. They discovered something else entirely. They discovered that humanity, when threatened, does not break. We do not bow, we do not surrender, we fight and we win." He paused, and Brooks could see the emotion in his eyes. This was a man who understood the weight of what had just happened. "This victory belongs to all of you. Every pilot, every engineer, every scientist who worked day and night to prepare our defenses. Every citizen who stood ready to defend their home. Today, we proved that Earth is not a target, it is a fortress. And anyone who threatens us will learn the same lesson that the Vorchin Empire just learned." Mendez straightened, his voice growing stronger. "But this is only the beginning. We know there are other threats out there, other empires, other species that might see us as prey, so we will remain vigilant. We will continue to build, to innovate, to prepare. And if they come again, we will be ready, because we are humanity. And we do not go gentle into that good night." The transmission ended, and Brooks felt a surge of pride, not in himself but in his species. In 3 months they had accomplished what should have been impossible. They had unified a fractured world, developed revolutionary technology, and defeated an empire that had been conquering worlds for millennia. And they had done it with 0 human casualties in combat. That was the part that would really terrify the galaxy, once word got out. Not just that Earth had won, but how completely they had won. "Set course for high orbit," Brooks ordered, "and begin preparations for expanded patrol routes. If there are more aliens out there watching, I want them to see us. I want them to know that Earth is defended." "Yes, sir," his navigation officer responded. As the Defiance moved into position, Brooks thought about the future. The galaxy had just learned that humanity existed. And more importantly, it had learned that humanity was dangerous. Good. Let them know. Let every empire, every federation, every collective out there understand one simple truth. Earth was off limits. 3 weeks later, a small probe emerged from slip space at the edge of the solar system. It was Vorchin in design, barely larger than a human fist, designed for stealth reconnaissance. It had been launched from a monitoring station light years away, programmed to investigate why the invasion fleet had gone silent. The probe's sensors swept the system, cataloging what it found. No Vorchin fleet. No occupation force. Instead, it detected something else. Hundreds of human warships spread throughout the system in defensive formations, orbital platforms around Earth bristling with weapons, fortified positions on the Moon, Mars, and several of the larger asteroids, and everywhere sensors. Thousands of sensors, creating a detection grid so dense that nothing larger than a grain of sand could enter the system undetected. The probe attempted to retreat, to jump back to slip space and report its findings. But before it could charge its drive, a human destroyer appeared beside it, having tracked its arrival and intercept course with casual precision. A tractor beam locked onto the probe, pulling it into the destroyer's cargo bay. The last thing the probe transmitted before its systems were disabled was an image of the destroyer's hull. Along the side, painted in large letters, were the words, "Liberty." And below that, a message in multiple languages, including Vorchin. Earth remembers. The probe's transmission cut off, and somewhere across the galaxy, a Vorchin monitoring station received its final data packet. The officers on duty stared at the information in growing horror. The invasion fleet was gone. The humans were not primitives, and Earth had just become the most dangerous place in the known galaxy. The news spread quickly through the Empire's intelligence networks. Within days, the High Command knew. Within weeks, every military installation in the Empire had been briefed. And within a month, a new directive had been issued to every ship captain, every scout, every explorer. Avoid the Sol system. Avoid Earth. The humans were no longer considered viable targets for conquest. They were classified as a Class A threat. Hostile, technologically advanced, and extremely dangerous. Vorchin Empire, which had been expanding unchecked for 3 millennia, had just encountered something it hadn't expected to find. An opponent that couldn't be intimidated. A species that had turned warfare into an art form refined through thousands of years of practice, humanity. And the galaxy would never be the same. On Earth, life continued. The threat had passed for now. But everyone knew it would come again. And so the work continued. Factories ran day and night, building new ships, new weapons. Scientists pushed the boundaries of physics, seeking every advantage. Soldiers trained relentlessly, preparing for the next battle. The unity that had formed in the face of alien invasion remained strong. Nations still had their disagreements, their different cultures and ideologies. But now there was an understanding, a common purpose that transcended old rivalries. Earth was humanity's home, and they would defend it against anything. In a small apartment in New York City, a child named Sophie Grant looked up at the night sky. Her mother worked at the Lunar Command Center. Her father was an engineer on one of the orbital platforms. She had grown up knowing that there were aliens out there, that Earth was not alone. She didn't find it scary. She found it exciting. Because if there were aliens out there, that meant the universe was full of possibilities. And humanity was ready to explore them, to meet whatever challenges came their way. After all, they had just proven something important. Humanity wasn't just another species. They were survivors, warriors, innovators, and when someone tried to hurt them, they hit back harder than anyone could have imagined. The Empire had attacked Earth, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had been annihilated before they even knew what hit them. That story would spread through the galaxy, carried by traders and explorers and spies. Other species would hear about the humans, the species that turned their entire world into a fortress in a matter of months. Some would be frightened, some would be impressed, and some perhaps would want to be allies. Because if humanity could do this in defense of their home, imagine what they could do with friends at their side. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Earth had announced its presence to the galaxy, not with a whimper but with a roar, and the message was unmistakable. We are here, we are strong, and we will not be conquered. The war that began on a Tuesday had ended in less than 8 minutes, but the consequences would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had taken its first step onto the galactic stage, and they had done it in the most human way possible. with overwhelming force, brilliant tactics, and an absolute refusal to back down. The Vorchin Empire had learned a lesson that countless human armies throughout history had learned before them. Never underestimate your opponent. Never assume victory is certain. And never, ever, threaten someone's home without being prepared for the consequences. Because humans, more than any other species in the galaxy, understood one fundamental truth about survival. When you're fighting for your home, for your family, for everything you hold dear, there is no such thing as impossible odds. There is only winning or dying. And humans had long ago decided that dying was not an acceptable option. The stars looked down on Earth, indifferent and eternal. But now, among those stars, humanity had carved out a place for itself. A home, a fortress, a beacon that declared to the universe, "We are here and we are not going anywhere. Let the galaxy take note."